and we're live to review a good episode of Homicide. Over to Jeff.
All right, this is Season 7, Episode 4, entitled The 20% Solution, written by David Simon and directed by Clark Johnson, and originally aired October 30th, 1998 on NBC. So I don't know which of these brief recaps is better, so I'm going to read both of them. On Wikipedia, it says, days after the disappearance of a best-selling mystery writer, his wife arrives in the squad room insisting that he has been murdered. With no body or direct evidence of a crime, Ballard and Gardy scramble to wade through the potential suspects. The writer's wife, his mistress, his agent, an ex-CIA operative, and Danvers has his hands full taking the case to trial. Munch's plans for a weekend getaway with Billy Lou are thrown into chaos when he and Bayless investigate the death of an elderly woman during a burglary attempt. The two are hard put to decide whether or not they have a murder on their hands. Taking a not-so-subtle hint from Stivers, Falzone asks Ballard out on a date. On the TV.com recap, it says, a woman brings to the homicide unit her mystery writer husband's videotaped declaration that his literary agent is responsible for his murder. Ballard and Gardy catch the case, only there is no body or crime scene. Meanwhile, Munch and Bayless investigate the death of an elderly woman that occurred during a break-in. Was it a homicide? Munch would rather leave for his weekend rendezvous with Billy Lou. Ballard and Gardy's investigation becomes a red ball as they find evidence in the writer's office that a crime was committed. The break leads to the arrest of the literary agent and his accomplice, although Danvers can't guarantee a conviction. Falzone asks Ballard if she'd like to go out on Saturday night. Just then the jury comes back, and a sharp-eyed juror insists that justice is done. So, of course, what that means is our good friend, the defense attorney, Mr. Russum, tries a little trick with the jury by telling them that the murder victim is alive and is about to walk through the courtroom, and everybody looks at the door except for the two people that are on trial. So that's how the one juror determines that they were guilty. So, Ben, what did you think?
Right. Right, I did. Okay. Interesting. Well, I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. I give it 9 out of 10. I thought that the style of the dialogue in the first scene, especially, it was good. I like the way Lewis's character came through in that first scene when they were talking about hip Jews, and then him feeling that, you know, he says him believing that he's always at the cutting edge, and things like that. And that might be part of the artisan temperament. We can talk about that later on. But even the secondary storyline was believable. Initially, I thought this woman might be Billy Lou because there's some resemblance there, but that disappeared after a few seconds. So the secondary storyline with Bayless and Munch, that was okay. That was where they were going through some of the provisos of that, and I think that at one point Munch made a good point. I can't remember what it was.
You didn't take your usual 7 pages of notes? I'm so disappointed in you.
I know, I should have. Yes, I should have taken notes. So that was the secondary story, and that was good. It felt natural, the dialogue. Ballard's reactions to Stu, I thought it gave the actress good opportunity to have reaction shots to Stuart.
Which actress?
The one playing Ballard.
Okay.
It worked like quite well as a comedy episode. You had the intricacies of the police procedure going on in the middle. In, you, you had some leads where, like with the guy, like this guy on screen now, when you initially meet him, you wonder, is he going to be like one of those other guys in the previous story? And everywhere they had like the incompetent spies. Mm-hmm. And you wonder initially, oh, will he be one of these guys that thinks he's really competent when he isn't? Or like how they may go with that. So there's a little bit of suspense around that plot point. But it turns out a bit different from that. This was an interesting character because like he's like an SFP criminal where he cares more about the people than the crime. So yeah, standards.
Oh, the burglar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've kind of had that before. We've had, you know, characters that were not murderers, but they were criminals of other types that, you know, have used that as their defense, basically, by saying, you know, look, I may rob people for a living, but I don't kill people, kind of thing. You know, that's so he was, you know, another one of those.
Yeah, he's the sort of person who's like, hey, you got to do what you do to survive.
Or like your favorite, Mr. Clean.
Oh yes, like, PSJ.
Doesn't kill anybody. He just he's the brains behind the operation and cleans up the mess. Yeah, I think Lewis would have been was more offended for somebody implying he wasn't hip or whatever than he would have been if somebody said he was a lousy detective. So again, it goes back to what where he gets his self-esteem from.
Yeah, and also he can look at his clearance rate. He can sort of know whether he's a hip detective or not. But in terms of the hip thing, also like he's getting a little bit older now, Lewis. So it always is going to be one of these things where he might think, "Oh, am I hip or not?" Like, because it's something you got to keep on your guard because you know you could lose the hipness quite quickly.
Yeah, I think part of it's like the changing, you know, people in the squad room. It's like there was a time in which nobody would have doubted, you know, he was like the cool guy in the squad, and now it's like all these new people, and he's kind of like, you guys don't understand who I am, you know? You young hotshots think you got it, and you don't understand. I'm the cool guy around here. Yeah, I still think he is, but I may not necessarily all see it that way. And of course, Munch is going to stir the pot regardless. So even if he thought that about Lewis, he's going to like egg on the people that are like, you know, poking at him because that's how he is.
What did you think of it, Andrew?
I really liked it. I actually liked it a bit better than the previous episode. The beginning with the references to like the hip Jews, like the Marx Brothers, Lenny Bruce, Freud, he used to be hip. And then I like the Humphrey Bogart reference to Maltese Falcon. That was cool. I guess in the last episode there was a reference to like an old Hollywood kind of noirish type film. But yeah, I did enjoy this. And I'm really finding that I like Munch, the character of, I think, Munch. Yeah, I like his character a lot. He brings like an extra, like something that I feel like if his character wasn't in the show, it would definitely be lacking that. And it seems pretty important. And I did like what you mentioned about the burglar having some ethics or like values, like lines that he's drawn for himself that he won't cross. I think it seemed very realistic. Both storylines, and particularly the second storyline, seemed very real, like true to life. So yeah, I like this episode.
You actually saw some ethics from Munch where it says, yeah, the old lady's fine.
Is Munch an ESTP or what is
Whoa, whoa,
ENTP?
whoa, 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 whoa! You might need to go back to typology school if you think Munch is an ESTP.
Sorry, yeah. Well, is he an ENTP?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
I just realized.
I think, I thought it was you last time that said there was like one NT character, and I kind of wondered at the time who you were saying was that. If it wasn't Munch, then who it would be? but yeah, he seems like a pretty good example of an ENTP to me.
Yeah, and I've just realised, Andrew, you've only seen 1 or 2 episodes, so maybe I shouldn't say you should go back to typology school. So I'm sorry
no,
for saying that.
No, that's fine. That makes sense. ENTP. So yeah, no, he's a really good character. I enjoy it.
Well, I'm glad you like him because he's in about 500 more episodes on American television as the same character across different series.
Yeah, he's like the character to appear in the most episodes of television ever. It's amazing.
Wow.
Outside of soaps.
Well, yeah, right. The prime time, I should specify that. Because, if you count all the episodes of daytime, then, there's some people way past that. But, yeah, and the most different series appearing on, because his character appeared on not only several different Law and Order incarnations, but also the X-Files and at least one other show I can't even think of at the moment. So he even went across networks that weren't even all NBC shows.
Networks. The power of Munch.
Yep. But ironically, in all that, he's actually not. I still think somewhat underused on Homicide. There's a lot of episodes that they focused more on newer characters, and even though he was there from the very beginning, there was less of a focus on him. And really the only episode that I can think of that really just spent a lot of time focusing on his background, both Ben and I agreed they didn't do all that great a job of it. So, and there were a few other ones that touched on some things like his sort of hippie-like past and stuff from like the late '60s and stuff. So they had the episode of where he had the ex-girlfriend that had the photograph of him naked and stuff, So there was some things like that, but in general, like there's a lot of more time spent on some of the other characters than Munch. So you can tell, I think, with Homicide that they didn't want to get too deep with the show, really. Like they would occasionally have episodes that kind of delved more into, I guess, sort of philosophical issues, but that really wasn't the focus of the show. So you didn't have like extended periods of, Munch analyzing things really hard. You didn't, they could have done more of that, and there really wasn't. It's not a CSI type of show either. There wasn't a whole lot of time spent on examining a whole lot of physical evidence either. So there's, some of those things that could have been, but Homicide was never really about that. It's really more. David Simon's point all along was basically to display that police work was not glamorous like that it was depicted on some shows, that it was more kind of day-to-day drudgery than anything else, and that in general most of the criminals were not high profile either. Most of them didn't have really good reasons for doing things. They were pretty simple and sometimes out and out stupid. And that there were a lot more stories from the cops of that type of stuff than there was, amazing movie of the week type stories.
What I've noticed from Munch is that, and part of it is his type, and part of it, I think, is his experience, is that he does very much jump to conclusions very quickly and generalizes.
But also can change his mind pretty quickly, Tom, when he's presented with new evidence. Faster, I think, than he would have if he was an NTJ.
Yeah.
As we've discussed before. Andrew, when at the beginning of the series, there's a character, Steve Grissetti, the detective that Lewis's original partner, that I think was an NTJ, and
Okay.
he was a lot harder to knock off his assumptions than Munch was. And he had a lot of conspiracy theories, including about who shot Abraham Lincoln.
Okay. And this is in season 1?
Yes. Yeah, he's in the first 2 seasons.
And did they come from, was it somebody's real concerns about them? Was it like David Simon's own theories or somebody else's own theories on the show? Like the series creator, maybe?
I don't think so. I think it was I think, if I remember right, Cressetti was sort of a combination of 2 different characters from the actual Baltimore PD and from David Simon's book. And I think one of the characters of those 2 was sort of a conspiracy theorist, so he just sort of combined that into the deal.
Oh, I thought there was like one of the show's producers had like an interest in like American history.
That might have been part of it. Fontana might have.
Yeah.
I don't remember. So I think some of the stuff they kind of used the characters to put their own stuff out there. Obviously with Munch, a lot of his initial lines were stuff out of Richard Belzer's stand-up act. So it was like kind of a combination of the guy the copy was based on, and then Belzer's own observations.
So Andrew, you've watched The Wire. Have you watched all of The Wire?
No, I haven't. I've watched all of season 1 and part of season 2, but then I moved away. My roommate, who had HBO Go, moved away. We kind of split up. So I haven't been able, or I've been able, but I just haven't watched the rest of it. But I really like season 1.
Right. So what I was thinking there is, like, because this episode was written by David Simon and you've seen The Wire, can you like see, oh right, this is definitely in the style of David Simon, and maybe things you noticed?
I can see that. I can see similarities between even the past episode and this episode in The Wire. This episode for sure. It seems to be that with the second storyline with the burglar, how he's depicted seems to be similar to at least the first season of The Wire. Some of the criminals are kind of humanized and not shown as just these, just completely crazy or like, evil type people. They're very, they're relatable in a way. And I also like how he depicts the police force as being a kind of messy, dirty job and just the day-to-day grind of it rather than like romanticizing it in any way. So, yeah. I thought this episode was pretty similar to The Wire. I just think with The Wire, with HBO, they kind of explore things a little more in depth because they have more, there's more time to, I think. They kind of, maybe also more funding, I'm not sure, but they kind of explore maybe characters in different ways, kind of like what Jeff was saying about what they could do with Munch. I think maybe characters in The Wire, main characters are kind of explored a little more fully. So
I can imagine the HBO version of Homicide would be just a little bit more extreme because they had to tone it down.
Right.
Yeah, and they talked about a little bit about that on like the DVD commentaries for Homicide, like some of the things that they had to sort of change. I won't spoil it completely in case you want to go back and see that episode, Andrew. But there's one where they did about a particular old man who worked at like a funeral home or something, where the original storyline, the network basically forced him to sort of sanitize. But in a way, Ben and I kind of agreed it ended up actually sort of being creepier the way that they did it than what the original storyline was. So sometimes I'm of the opinion that sort of a certain kind of censorship or kind of toning certain things down can sometimes make for a more interesting story depending on how it's done.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes HBO sometimes has maybe there can be so graphic that you become, you're not, it doesn't really affect you as much when you see it all the time. So I think you sometimes have to be more creative with, of course, like when you have restrictions. So yeah,
it's like Game of Thrones.
You kind of have to come up with other ways to sort of depict things where you can figure out what's happening without it necessarily having every detail shown to you.
Yeah. It's like in the early seasons of Game of Thrones, it would be just nudity and violence just all the while, and this is a HBO show.
And I think that, you know, in some cases, like a show like NYPD Blue, the hook originally was they were like, oh, they're going to be daring in what they show, but if that had been all there was to the show, it wouldn't have lasted very long. They made it a good show where it existed beyond just that sort of initial hype over, oh, they're going to show more skin and use language that hadn't been on TV much, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, that was like the thing that kind of roped people in. They got the initial ratings, but they actually proved that they were good at writing characters and stories enough that people would keep watching, even if that wasn't the reason. So, you know, in Homicide from the beginning, the kind of gimmicky type stuff they sort of started with was, we're going to be like really gritty. We're going to do the, you know, camera tricks and stuff we were talking about last week, where they did a lot of like the triple takes and shaky cam stuff. And some of that got toned down and they brightened the colors up and stuff, but they maintained the, you know, importance of writing strong characters and compelling stories. So. I guess I'll take this opportunity to say, since they're showing, since we got the picture of the wife up there again, that I don't have the same taste in women that Gardy does. I wouldn't say either one of them was a 10, especially the French chick. She kind of looked rather mannish to me.
Well, you know, God is getting on a bit, and
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's perfectly fine if that's his taste, but I don't know. There's something I'm slightly thrown off when there's like a character that I don't find attractive at all, that people are just going on and on about how attractive they are. It's like, obviously people have different tastes, but I sort of sit there like, really, who are you trying to convince?
Yeah, you had that reaction with Servalan in Blake 7.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, but in general, yeah, it's like the more time you have to spend with people on screen talking about how attractive somebody is, it's almost like the people in the show are not confident that the person is attractive enough for the part. They've got to keep saying that to like try to convince the audience, oh, that people think this person's attractive. Because the ones that are truly attractive, you don't have to keep saying that. Everybody knows.
Right. Yeah. I would give it compared to the last episode, which I guess I gave a 7 to, this episode I would give, either like an 8.5 or a 9. This was really, I've only seen 2 episodes, but I really like this one.
Cool. Well, I'll give it an 8. So, well, we're all pretty agreed it was a solid episode. I have a different perspective. Obviously, I've seen all the episodes before that. It's hard for me to give it a 9 because I think of so many better ones that I gave a 9. So this one's sort of like, okay, it was solid. I liked a lot of the stuff in it, you know, but it's not quite as good as some of those other ones. So it gets an 8 from me. But so I guess, but it's still around a 8.5 to 9 from the 3 of us. Anything else you wanted to say about this one, Ben?
It's just that when we've had other good episodes before, generally it can be difficult to talk about it because it's like we can't find anything wrong with it, and it's an odd situation.
I mean, I can find some things wrong with it if we really want to get into it.
Go on then.
You know, in general, like, okay, one thing that was unique about this episode, I guess I should have mentioned this, I thought of it earlier, but unlike Law and Order, on the Homicide, we don't usually go straight to following the trial of a case that just got brought up earlier in the same episode. It's very unusual. In fact, it may be the only episode that ever did that of Homicide. We have had episodes that have covered courtroom proceedings, but they're usually previous cases that we had in a previous episode, or even ones that hadn't been mentioned before, because the idea was to show what the cops do on a day-to-day basis, and one of the things they have to do is testify in court. So, you know, there's some of the first couple seasons they were testifying on cases that, you know, had happened before the show even started. But I don't remember any other episode where we went all the way from initial case all the way to the trial in the one episode. Maybe the one with Bruce Campbell, where about the guy that shot his dad. That might have been, because I think that was a 2-parter, but I think that the trial was in the first part. So that may be the only other one I can think of that did that. So that I don't have like a total problem with that, but I guess I would prefer it better if they had put off that part and had it in another episode, which they may not have known if they were going to have time, if they were going to make it long enough on the show to have a follow-up episode. But to me, it makes it better when you kind of don't try to cram all that into one episode. So even though I thought it was a clever ending, I think that could have been stretched a little bit more and made it a little bit better. It seemed a little bit too fast. So, there's a few things like that. Again, already the aforementioned attractiveness of the French girlfriend. I was thinking, why would he? I was like, his wife's not like super attractive to me, but she's a lot better looking than the girlfriend.
Oh yeah,
So
definitely.
Like, why would he pick her? But anyway, that distracted me slightly. But there was just the usual kind of thing, like that I've said, that certain focuses are sometimes off. I actually like the fact that we didn't get a ton of Falzone in the episode, that he was just sort of a little bit of comic relief in the time that he was there. So I liked some of those elements.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just, I feel like there's certainly things I could pick at, but it still was solid entertaining, so that's why I still give it an 8. And I agree it was better than the previous week's episode. All right, so once again recapping those scores, we had those two gave it a 9 and I gave it an 8 for average of around 8.5, 8.75, something like that. And join us next week for an episode called Red Wine.
Red wine.
Yep.
Okay. Bye-bye, folks.
Bye.
Bye.